9/10/12/24/2024. All right, this is the second time. Hello. Just finished Not About Nightingales. Different play. Good title. Different kind of play. I set out to read a bunch of Tennessee Williams's work because I'd only known about Streetcar and The Glass Menagerie, and suddenly last summer I hadn't read his other works. I've read some short stories of his privately, but not for a long time. And I'm debating about potentially reading some of those on the channel as well. But I'd never read some of his other plays. And I haven't read them all, but I've read a lot, as evidenced on the channel. And it's very apparent how much of his works are influenced by, I think, his family dynamic, his living arrangements, life experiences, like all writers. When I'm reading these, again, I go into them cold. I don't really know much about them, and there are times when I'm reading it and it's unfolding, I can feel the play shifting and feel it moving in a certain direction. And it's really cool when I'm actively reading it and feeling like I know what he's doing. This year and last year, I really wanted to challenge myself with reading. I've blabbed several times on this channel about my insecurity with reading and trying to push myself into having a kind of better relationship with the written word and literature. And a lot of last year and some of this year, I read the works of Gore Vidal, which, I mean, it's not easy. He's much more intelligent. Most of the works I read, they're from people who are much more learned, intelligent than I am, and a little bit more worldly than I am. I'm kind of riding on the coattails of their worldliness. That's kind of the point. They keep their antennae up and gather until they feel it necessary to put it down and compose something, and then we read it. I'm very happy to have read what I've read this year, and I hope to continue that on to the next year, even if it's challenging. And it is challenging. Just yesterday, I started to try to start Dostoevsky's The Idiot, and I was lost within the first 17 pages. So it's like, okay, well, I have a choice. I can just give up on it entirely, or read it again, try again, start again, and not be overwhelmed by the information I'm intaking. So, and I think that's in line with just trying and pushing through. And if I try again and I'm not, it's not doing anything for me, there's nothing that says I have to continue on reading any particular work. Maybe it's a sign to just stop and move on to the next thing. But I'm very happy to have read a lot of Tennessee's works this year. It wasn't a plan to, it just kind of happened. I was happy to read Patty Chayefsky's works, and I haven't read all of them, but I read a lot of them. And I'm kind of hoping to get into the great books in Shakespeare, and I haven't read all of Poe's work, kind of like the standards. And there's a lot of books that I've purchased over the years that I haven't read. I'm glad to have finally read D.H. Lawrence and Theodore Dreiser. I still haven't read Jeannie Gerhardt or Lady Chatterley's Lover, but started with Sister Carrie and Sons and Lovers. I think is a good start. They were both really good. Some of them were a little long-winded, but really good. And I really love to see authors referenced in other authors' works. I love that Tennessee wrote a whole play about D.H. Lawrence and his sister. As I've said, I've had these works for a while now, and I had no idea that he wrote a play based off D.H. Lawrence and his sister. Let's see. What is it called? Shit, I just read it the other day. I Rise in Flame, Cried the Phoenix. And it was really good. I enjoyed that one. But yeah, for a solid month, I've been reading kind of nothing but Tennessee, which is great. I've read, let me check it out. Or probably 2 months now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 Tennessee William plays. Like 15 of which I'd never read before. So I'm really happy. And I'm happy to revisit The Glass Menagerie, Streetcar, and Suddenly Last Summer. And all of which are, again, a little bit above my intellectual threshold, but that's how you push it, right? That's how you push your intellect, is by challenging it. And it's not that I don't want to challenge it, but I think in challenging it, you're revealing to yourself how dumb you are, or we'll be generous and say ignorant. And it's just kind of like, well, it is what it is, and here it is, and you can face it. And if you face it, maybe you won't be in that vulnerable state anymore. So there's that. I also want to ramble a little bit about this documentary I watched yesterday called Film Worker. And I might watch it again after this little ramble here. Watched a documentary called Film Worker about kind of the life of Leon Vitali. And I have a feeling the filmmakers that made Film Worker did so because Leon Vitali looked like he was dying for like several years. And in watching this film, you find out why. And I'm glad the filmmakers made the film before he died, because it was very revelatory in terms of like the Stanley Kubrick mythology. Leon Vitali was, I won't say the right-hand man of Stanley Kubrick. I kind of feel like there's dueling people for that position. namely Jan Harlan is one of them. But Leon Vitali is kind of the unsung hero of Stanley Kubrick's life's work, at least from Barry Lyndon forward. Um, he was an actor that was rising in the 60s and 70s. And in the middle 70s, he got a chance to be in Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon. And he was. And me personally, I think I've only seen Barry Lyndon in its entirety maybe once in my life. I have it on DVD. I have it here. But it's a challenging movie. If you're somebody that's a little bit scatterbrained like myself, that's code for like have a poor attention span. It's challenging. It's a film that has its own pace and its own composition that isn't um, the run of the mill films. It takes its time. It unfolds slowly. It lets you into it gingerly. Like it's not slow. It is, but it unfolds. It's just a different approach to filmmaking. And it's not that films have to be fast or have to have a certain tempo to them to be engaging. And they are sometimes, but Barry Lyndon is just one of those films that takes its own time, and it's up to you to stick with it. And I think, to be fair, I don't know that I've ever myself given it a concerted viewing, like a concentrated viewing. Anyhow, Leon Vitali had a prominent part in that film. And him being a fan of Kubrick, he was elated and he worked hard on it. And after the filming, he made a decision to quit acting and dedicate his life to working for Stanley. And he said before even coming on Barry Lyndon, he said to a friend, "I want to work with that man." And it wasn't until the end of the film Leon Vitali started talking about his relationship with his father that kind of explained why he essentially sacrificed his whole life to work for somebody else. And I'm glad they asked him, "Is that what you wanted? Is that what you wanted to do?" And he very confidently and with assurance and consent said, "Yes, this is what I wanted to do. This is what I wanted in my life." And I agreed to it, and I was happy to do it. But you can very clearly see this is a person that did this at a great cost. There's this thing where we feel like we can't talk about people's appearance in this time. In history and the timelines, we're living in a very politically correct atmosphere, and talking about people's appearances is I don't know, body shaming or whatever. And sometimes it is uncalled for, but I think as people, we're just naturally curious about everything, and that includes people's looks. Leon Vitali, again, looked very ill for like, I don't know, a lot of the 90s and the 2000s, he looked deathly ill. And in watching this film, it's kind of explained why. I think every waking hour he dedicated to Stanley Kubrick's movies. And it wasn't just being an assistant, and it's not just during the duration of production, it's in the preservation of Stanley's films. And I didn't know that after Stanley Kubrick died, they were in post production, or I think either nearing post production or in active post production of completing Eyes Wide Shut. And in the film, they were talking about how after Stanley died, everybody, like, there was like this maelstrom of having to decide how to complete the project of Eyes Wide Shut, and who would have the prestige of like being the person that would save the film or whatever. And it was somehow decided that Leon, because Leon spent day in and day out with Kubrick, would know what Kubrick wanted to finish the film. And he got a lot of shit for that. And this poor man, this guy, keep in mind, there were only 3 films after Barry Lyndon. The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, and Eyes Wide Shut. But in those 3 films, you have, I guess, pre-production, production, post-production, and then the legacy of each film and tending to them. I think it was Katerina Kubrick was talking about how even after the films were done, Kubrick was still, quote-unquote, tending to his babies out there in the world, meaning as time goes on and you have different formats that the films are going to come out in, each time there's a new format, you have everything that comes along with it. What the film's going to look like, the aspect ratio, the advertising, the packaging, the if it's played at festivals or exhibitions or this, that, and the other, somebody's got to do the work of presenting them and preserving them, and the restoration efforts and the coloring and just all this stuff. And with Stanley Kubrick, there's archiving. There's I forget where, there's a couple documentaries on just how much stuff Kubrick had in terms of his research into each film and everything, I guess, he wrote and was involved with each film, correspondence and diaries, inventory, note-taking, scheduling, just all of it, and how somebody had to archive all that, and then not just archive it, but keep it, babysit it, preserve it. And then if you're going to showcase a film somewhere, or some, say, the Criterion Collection or some distribution, whoever Warner Brother, I don't know how it works, but whoever has the right to distribute it in such a way, somebody's got to fueled that, and Leon would have been the person to do it. And it's just, this man like neglected his marriage and his children and his life for somebody else, and his kids were very sweet and matter of fact. That in the film you see Leon spending time with like Danny Lloyd during the filming of The Shining, and like Arlie Ermy in the shooting of Full Metal Jacket. And he's like, and Robin Williams' kids have talked about this too. We're jealous. Our dad chose to spend time with other people and not with us. And I just always think like, and I've seen this come up time and time again, and it's just what people who choose to dedicate their lives to something do. They have to make a decision about whether they're going to be involved or not involved. Well, if you have kids, first you have to make a decision about whether or not you're going to have kids. And if you make the decision to have kids, you're either there or you're not there. Maybe that's unfair to say. I think some people, they try to juggle it all as best they can, and it's not fair to count them as not there. But I think with someone like Leon, he made a deliberate choice to dedicate his life to the work of Stanley. The problem is the work of Stanley never stops. Even though Leon's been gone for like 2 years now, I don't think the work with Stanley has stopped. Somebody, I don't know if it's Jan or other people in the atmosphere, is keeping the work going. I think in terms of Stanley, like, a lot has been done to preserve and tend to these films as much as possible, so that when a lot of the Kubrick people are gone, these films will live on very well and hopefully be taken care of as much as films can be when it's out of the hands of its creators. And a lot of that is because of Leon. But it's interesting to me how you make a choice to commit to yourself to one person, and the dynamics evolve over time. Like, if you're an assistant to someone, especially if it's someone you love, they'll take liberty with what you give them. So if you've given them, say, like, at one point in time, you give them everything you got, and it's a lot, and it's great, the mark, wherever the mark was, now moves higher. Okay, so what you gave me last time was great. It was great, but now I've set this new threshold. And, what you did was great, but it's not as high, it's not as great as where it is now. Can you do now, where it is higher now? And I think with Leon, that mark just kept rising and rising and rising and rising. And they talked about how the guy never slept. He didn't take care of himself because he put all of his energy into this work. And you could tell, like, physically, you can tell by the look of him, this looks like the person that paid the pound of flesh for the work he did. And I guess as a layman, I have a problem understanding I'm gonna watch the film again, but I have a problem understanding what what exactly it was he spent a lot of his work on. Because there comes a point where, like, you're you're not a friend and an assistant anymore. You're essentially like a lapdog that's like grateful to be a lapdog. Like this, I don't want to say sycophant because I think that's insulting to him, but I mean there is a point where it's like you've given up your life for this person and it's still not enough. I'm pushing myself to whatever endurance I have for you, and it won't be enough. And I'm sorry for that. And it's like, ugh. And I'm a fan of Stanley Kubrick as much as the next person. And maybe I don't understand what it takes to create certain works of art, what goes into it, what sacrifices have to be made. But there's a kind of intentional cruelty here that does not sit well. Like they showed footage of Kubrick with his kids, right? And it's like, okay, so you see he's got kids and a wife. And you start to wonder, like, did you ask him to sacrifice that? Or was there like an unspoken thing where you expected him to sacrifice that and he did? And did you do that because you know he did? And why did you do that? And maybe I don't understand what goes into the tending of these films. Is it more about the films or about the filmmaker? Because as I'm watching this film worker, I feel like a lot of it is about preserving the legacy of Stanley Kubrick and not so much the films. And there seems to be this muscle at work from like his inner circle, like his direct family members to like all his assistants, like Leon and other assistants, to cultivate this like mythological figure. And a lot of this documentary was in praise of Stanley, but it was also more factual than the Stanley Kubrick documentary was. It was more honest, I think, about what Stanley was asking of people for his films. And who is to decide what and where the mark is for what's acceptable for the completion of a film or the finality? Because when I'm actively talking about it and actively watching this documentary, there doesn't seem to be an end. And I think they talked about that in the work, that there's no real end to this work. And it's like, well, if a film is completed, and you put it out into the world, you can't control how people are going to view it. And the more you quote unquote tend to it, the more you're trying to control a situation that you shouldn't be. It's art. You shouldn't be controlling it. People are going to, no matter how you present it, package it, whatever, people are going to have their own opinions of it, as they should. And I wonder with Leon, did there ever come a point where he sacrificed so much that I wonder if he ever asked himself, was it worth it? And I was a great actor. I gave up a wonderful thing where I had a really promising career, and I gave that up to work with Stanley. And yeah, it was great. I'm a part of film history, a very important part, and I'm proud to be. But look at what I paid for it. And he, by all accounts, Leon is very smiley. Like, he's a beautiful soul. Like, he's very upbeat and engaging and honest and forthright when talking about his feelings about it all, you know. But there's this thing about they talked about Stanley as being a genius, and people know that they're in the presence of someone, we'll say, a little bit elevated than themselves or capable of doing or touching something that's going to make a bigger impression than what they would ever have done in their life. So they choose to forfeit their own solitary path to kind of push this greatness forward. And I think it was a deliberate choice. Like, it was a conscious choice. It wasn't an unconscious choice. But in that conscious choice, there's this unconsciousness to it that gets lost in the decision making, where the individual loses themselves. And even if they chose to lose themselves, I think I keep coming across this. You can choose to make a choice, and you know how it's going to go. And maybe for the most part, it does go the way you thought it was going to go, but there's still parts of it that you didn't expect and didn't think it would go a certain way that hit. And when they hit, you just have to accept it. But it still hurts when it hits. And it can hurt in many different ways, I think. And for Leon, I think he took a lot of hits that he didn't expect, and maybe even that Stanley didn't expect, and maybe some that he did expect and never made aware to him. But it's like, that's the price of admission. And even now, I think if Leon were here and if you asked him, was it worth it, he'd say yes. But even still, there's a human being behind that. And they talked about how, like, I think Jan and Christian are very territorial when it comes to Stanley, as they should be. That's their brother-in-law and her husband, But Leon was not just very much part of the equation, a huge part of the equation. And I wonder if there were any... Well, they talked about a little discrepancy. They talked about how there was this huge, career retrospective exhibit that a lot of people that weren't as involved with Stanley's work in life were asked to be involved, and he wasn't asked. And it's like, okay, and there's this very kind of tribal, territorial aspect to it that's very cutting and very apparent. And he deals with it with grace and humility, and he still honors Stanley, but it still happened. It still shows through people's behavior and treatment of you what they think of you. And as much as we want to say people don't care, don't care what people think of you, and because it doesn't matter, it still does. It still does. Because I think people in a situation like that where you have somebody that pushes forward great work that affects a lot of people want to be in that sphere and in that orbit and want to kind of um, take some kind of credit for that, even if they didn't do the work of that. There's some kind of they want some kind of title or ownership of that genius that they somehow had a part of. And there's still like this hierarchy and this ranking. And Leon just never seemed overly territorial about it, or he never seemed, what do I say? How do I say this? He never seemed biting about it. Maybe as much as Jan. And that's not to say like Jan was involved too. I see Jan in the footage, you know, of like Full Metal Jacket and Eyes Wide Shut. And Jan was involved, but just involved in different way. Different people were involved in different ways. But when you see the making of The Shining, you see the making of Full Metal Jacket, you see the making of Eyes Wide Shut, Leon is there. He's there, like, not literally in the trenches, but in, like, he's doing the work day in, day out. And in the Stanley Kubrick documentary, there's a guy that talked about how one of the best things about the documentary, A Life in Pictures with Stanley Kubrick, they were talking about how this one guy, the slit scan sequence guy from 2001, was talking about how he thinks Stanley had a hard time keeping up with his own intellect, that he lived and breathed his work, 7 days a week, almost 24 hours a day. And so I can't even imagine if, like, Leon's kids were neglected, how neglected, like, Anya, Katerina, Vivian were, you know, and how neglected Christian was. Stanley, like, she was at Child Wickberry. I wonder if she was just there alone, like, all the time. I wonder how much of his family, like, set aside their personal selves and put into his work, And maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's part of, like, wanting to claim a certain title to that genius, was like, well, I sacrificed a lot of myself in my life for this. Fuck yeah, I want a title. And fuck you for wanting a bigger or better title than me. And Leon just never seemed like that person, like, that had that, like, I don't even want to say, like, martyr complex. If anyone should or deserved to be stung or, like, deserved to say, hey, I deserve, wasn't entitled to say I deserve a title, it would have been him, and he never did. That I could see. And I don't know. That's just the way it is, I guess. He seemed happy with it, but that film was so depressing. But it was interesting, and it gave a new perspective on Stanley Kubrick. Like, I'm a fan of Stanley's, and no doubt because of all the people behind Stanley, that put in the work, that put into these films. It's not just Stanley Kubrick, it's everybody involved in the making of these films. The Shining is my all time favorite movie. I still love it, even after knowing everything I know so far about it. How he treated people, how he treated Shelley, and, how he, I don't know, just how difficult the making of it was. And I love Clockwork Orange and Barry Lyndon again. I've only seen once, but I have it. Full Metal Jacket is great. Eyes Wide Shut is very challenging. Um, Lolita, I have. It's very challenging. Spartacus, I think I've seen maybe once. Paths of Glory is great. Killer's Kiss. So I think there's something about if you're somebody that chooses to express themselves, and that's a main form of how you want to connect with the world and connect with people and make a mark proving your existence and life force. You want to make sure it's gonna make a lasting impression. It's gonna make a connection. And each person has to ask themselves, how they feel and what they want to do with their life, and what life means to them and what their life means to them. And as a human being, I think if you see something, everything that you're absorbing every day, and you see a chance at doing something or being a part of something that you know without a shadow of a doubt is going to have an impact or an influence in a very strong way, the desire to be a part of it is very great. And I think with Leon Vitali, he had it in multiple forms. He conveyed it through his acting, through his particular identity, and his raw emotion through his performances. And he showed it through his devotion to Stanley Kubrick and Stanley's film. And probably, I don't think just The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, and Eyes Wide Shut. I think all the films over time, as he began to get behind the camera and see what went into all the films and work preserving the films and how they would be portrayed or how they would be pushed forward. I think he expressed it both ways, and probably other ways too. I think for people in their lifetime, a lot of what they do that has impact on other people, they don't ever really know. And I think who and what they have impact on, sometimes they don't even know. And it's just this ripple effect that trickles throughout time, both like the good and bad effects. And it's just a very precious thing. I mean, I still don't have like a finite concluded thought on Leon. I think a big part of me feels like it's really sad. In some interviews, it looks like he can barely speak because he's so physically exhausted. I feel like there was an exploitation of a very pure soul who wanted to give more than he was capable of giving, who gave everything he could, and will never really be thanked properly for it. I think sometimes I think sometimes there is no gratification that can be had because it can't be made. Cuz how do you truly thank somebody for their life? It just comes up short. It almost comes up insulting because it isn't enough, you know. The exploitation of spirit and love is very, very painful. But I think people do it. If it's self inflicted, they do it because they're giving, they're purposely giving that love so other people feel it. And I think people that choose to exploit that know that those people that choose to give it are doing it out of this sincerity and pure purpose, and it's going towards something good, even though the act itself is very cruel. But there's this warped, like, understanding that that's how it is, and if you don't want to do it, don't do it. But if you do it, that's how it's going to go. And there's this, like, perverse acceptance of it. And I think Leon knew that. Whether or not, like, his loved ones did, I don't. Maybe they know it, but I think over time, Leon, there was just this understanding that he knew just what it was and what he was giving up. And as a fan of Stanley Kubrick, um, and by proxy as a fan of Leon Vitali, I wish he wouldn't have sacrificed so much of himself, for the films. I enjoy the films. There's a lot of things I enjoy. I enjoy music and I enjoy films and I enjoy other expressions. I don't want any one human being to hurt for it. And that's a very naive thing to say. I know it is, because pain is inevitable, I think, in any form of expression, but I would never want somebody to feel like they have to give all of themselves, even if they wanted to. Even if they wanted to, because there is a purity about them and a love about them that I feel like Leon was this person that was so brimming with love that he couldn't help but give it. And almost like he didn't care that it was exploited, because in the exploitation, he was giving it anyhow. And I think Stanley knew that. And I feel like receiving of it. Is that weird to say? I hope it's not weird to say. I love films and actors and writers and directors. I love them. I love so many of them for a variety of different reasons. And I understand to an extent, to the extent that I can, what goes into it and what sacrifices are made because of it. And with Leon, I wish I could just hug the guy and say, I wish you would have taken better care of yourself, and just say, I know what you were trying to do, and I got it. Like, as an audience member, I got it. I receive it, and keep some for yourself, man. But I just think he's just one of those people that just have so much to give, he couldn't help but give it, and he gave it, and that was it. It's very touching. It's a really good documentary. It's really hard. Like, when I talk out loud, sometimes I'm still trying to formulate my thoughts about how I feel about certain situations, and that was just kind of what I just did with Leon Vitali. And I, as a film fan, I credit him big time, and respect him for his work. And I look up to that kind of selflessness, that kind of pure, unadulterated selflessness. And I wish I could just give him a hug and hold him. Because I feel the love he gave. Is that weird to say? Maybe that's right on to say. I don't know. You guys tell me. Do you feel the love that Leon Vitali gave? Was that the point in his life's work? I kind of think so. It's Christmas Eve. Who's ever listening, I hope you have a Merry Christmas. I don't know if I'll do anything before New Year's. I might. I don't know. But I hope you have very happy holidays. Go enjoy yourselves and be with your loved ones and hug them and love them and be well and be happy, please. And that's all I gotta say right now. All right, love you.